In this video, I'm going to be showing you the top 15 settings you need to change if you have just got your brand new DJI Neo. We are going to cover tracking settings, camera settings, app settings, as well as some controller specific settings with plenty of tips and tricks along the way to help you get the most out of your Neo. And I'm also going to reveal the biggest mistake you can make with this drone that results in pretty much unusable video. Let's jump right in. And let's start with the first problem we want to solve, and that is what distance and what height you want the drone to track you at when it's following you. And you should set this each time you fly in a new location depending on the environment. Now to do this, we first need to pair our smartphone with the DJI Neo. So with the Neo turned on, you want to download and install the DJI Fly app to your phone if you haven't already. And then once you open that app, you will see a small connect icon appear on the bottom left of the screen. Now you want to tap this icon, and after a few seconds, your smartphone will have paired to the Neo. Now in here, you can do things like preview the camera feed from the Neo itself. You can change between the different quick shot modes. And once you have selected a quick shot mode, you can start it by pressing this button here. But what we are interested in is the settings menu. So you want to tap the settings button on the bottom right of the app. And then in here, you will see we have specific settings for each of the 6 quick shot modes. Now we are currently interested in the follow mode, so you want to tap the follow option, and then you will see 2 options appear. One for the follow distance and one for the follow height. So let's first look at the follow distance. Now if you're outdoors, I highly recommend setting this to far, as I have found in my testing that having it set to close or medium results in the drone flying too close to you, and this can often result in unusual compositions where parts of yourself or your subject are cut off. The far setting is also recommended if you are moving fast, because again, if you're using the close or medium settings and you stop abruptly, the drone can actually get very close to you. On the other hand, if you're using the Neo indoors, then I recommend setting this to the close setting, because if you're flying indoors, then chances are you don't have a lot of space, so you want to have the Neo close to you to avoid it hitting any obstacles. Next, we want to set the follow height, and this tells the Neo which height to fly at as it's following behind you. And again, you want to set this depending on the environment you are flying in. So if you're flying indoors or somewhere with overhead obstacles, such as a forest with branches, I recommend keeping this set to flat, as if you set it to high, the drone might actually rise up into them obstacles, so for example the branches in a forest or roof if you're flying inside, and as it has no obstacle avoidance, this probably will cause it to crash. However, if you are outdoors and you have lower obstacles such as bushes or hedges, then you will want to set this to high so that the drone flies higher and doesn't run the risk of hitting them obstacles as it tracks you. I also find the footage just looks better when using that higher perspective outdoors. So you can see both these follow settings are critical to set depending on the location you are flying to have a safe flight, but not just that, to get the best possible looking shots. Now just quickly, before moving on to the next crucial setting, if you're getting value from this video, please let me know by giving me a thumbs up and clicking that like button down below. And if you love all things drones, but also action cameras, gimbals and more, and want to learn about the best settings to get up and running quickly, along with tips and tricks to help you get more cinematic videos and better looking images with your gear, then please consider clicking that subscribe button down below. And when you're down there, be sure to check the notification bell so that you will be alerted when my new videos are released. It would be greatly appreciated. Then, if we go back, the next setting I recommend changing is the custom setting. Now on the top of the Neo there are 6 quick shot modes, but the last one is a mode called custom, and the reason it's called custom is because you can change what actually happens when you use that mode. Now you have 3 options to change from: helix, boomerang and direction track, and I highly recommend that you change this to direction track so that you can get tracking shots from other orientations than just from behind you. You see, when you use the follow tracking mode, no matter what orientation the drone is facing you when you palm launch it, may it be in front of you or to the side, once it starts tracking you, it will always rotate around to behind you and stay in that position as it follows you. So if you want to be able to have the Neo track you from the front orientation, you have to use this direction track mode. Now, if you're watching this video, then chances are you love learning new things about photography and filmmaking, just like I do. So I wanted to take a moment to tell you about something that's been really helpful for me recently, Skillshare, who are also today's video sponsor. Now, you might already know that Skillshare offers classes in tons of areas like animation, design, business and productivity, but did you know that they also have a wealth of content specifically for photography, videography and editing? Now this year I set a goal for myself to learn more about visual effects and specifically how to combine them with real drone footage. I think that's such an exciting combination. So to get started, I decided to learn Blender, which is a 3D animation tool. Now I'm pretty new to this and definitely out of my comfort zone, but I just finished the Blender and After Effects VFX Masterclass by Ruan Lotter, and it was fantastic, teaching me how to integrate things like digital objects and characters into real footage, and I can't wait to apply what I've learned. Now another area Skillshare has been really helping me recently is productivity. One of the goals I've set for myself in 2024 was to become more productive and more focused, and the Productivity Masterclass by the one and only Ali Abdal has been a game changer. If you're feeling stuck in that area too, I highly recommend checking it out. So whether you're looking to improve a skill you're already passionate about or explore something completely new, Skillshare is a fantastic place to start. And here's the best part. Using the link in the description down below, you can trial it free for a month. So be sure to check it out using that link down below. And again, I just want to say a big thanks to Skillshare for supporting this video. Now onto one of the most crucial settings, and I mentioned in my review of the Neo, which you can watch by clicking the link in the description down below, that I think the video quality from this drone is adequate at best. It's really intended for social media use only. So to make sure you are getting the best quality video possible from this drone, you want to make sure you tap into the camera settings and set the resolution to 4K 30 FPS. Now if you want to capture slow motion footage, you can drop the resolution down to 1080p and increase the frame rate to 60 FPS, which will allow you to slow your footage down by around 2 times. But if you do this, just remember 1080p is quite low quality. So for most scenarios, I highly recommend you keep this at 4K. And then if you scroll down, you will see we have a few options for the photo settings. Now for the aspect ratio, I highly recommend that you change this to 4:3, as this will allow the Neo to capture an image with the full size of the camera's sensor. Now you might say, well, I want an image in 16:9. Well, if that's the case, you're still better off capturing the initial image in 4:3, as this will give you more verticality in your photo, so that when you're cropping it down to a 16:9 image, you have more flexibility to do things like reframe your subject. Now, let's move on to a very important setting when it comes to making sure that you won't run out of any internal storage space. Now, if you press the controls button on the bottom center of the smartphone app, you will see this small microphone icon on the right side of the screen. Now when you press this, this will turn on a feature called audio recording. And what it means is whenever you're capturing footage with the Neo and using the smartphone app, your phone with its inbuilt microphones will be recording audio. And this means that you can vlog to the Neo and have that audio stored onto the Neo alongside the video footage. But something that's really nice is that this feature also removes the propeller noise from the Neo to give you a much cleaner audio track. Now this is a great feature if you want to use it. However, if you're not intending on vlogging or talking to the Neo and you don't want to capture audio, I recommend that you make sure this is set to off. You see, when this is turned on alongside the video file, the Neo will also be storing onto its internal storage the audio file, and this can take up more storage. So if you want to maximize the 20 gigabytes internal storage for videos and photos only, then I recommend that you turn this feature off. And now for the mistake that can result in pretty much unusable video. If you switch to flying the Neo with the DJI RC N3 controller, that's the controller you attach your smartphone to, you will notice that the interface changes. We now have an interface more like what we're used to seeing when flying other DJI drones compared to the smartphone only version of the app. Now, something you must do is go through and make sure that the settings such as resolution and FPS and image aspect ratio that you set on the smartphone only version of the app are the same on this new controller version of the app. You see, you don't want to make the mistake of presuming because you set the resolution to 4K when flying the Neo with the smartphone only, that now that you've attached the controller, that resolution will carry across, because you could go out and capture an entire day's worth of clips, and when you come home and view them, realize that the controller portion was recording in 1080p. So once you've attached your controller to the drone for the first time, go in and double check things like resolution is set to 4K and the image aspect ratio is set to 4:3. Now, another crucial setting you want to set is the auto return to home altitude. With the controller attached to your phone, or even using the Goggles 3, if you go to the settings menu under safety, you will see the auto return to home altitude setting. And what this dictates is the height that the drone will rise up to once return to home engages. Now, the reason this is absolutely crucial to set is because if you lose signal to the Neo and return to home engages, when the drone rises up to that altitude and flies back towards you, you have to remember it has no obstacle avoiding sensors. So if that altitude is set lower than any of the obstacles in your area, maybe it's lower than some of the tall trees around you, as the drone returns home to you, it will simply fly into them obstacles and crash, and that would be a disaster. So before you go flying with the controller and the Neo, you want to make sure that you set that auto return to home altitude higher than any of the obstacles around you, so that when return to home engages, it will safely fly up above them and there will be no risk of the drone colliding with them as it comes back to you. Now, with the controller attached to your smartphone, you will see that we have the ability to switch the exposure between auto, where the drone automatically controls the shutter speed and ISO, and manual, where we can manually control the ISO and shutter speed. Now, I would generally recommend that you use the manual mode, but because the Neo doesn't currently have any ND filters available for it, you won't really get any of the benefits of using manual mode. So for that reason, I just recommend that you leave this set to auto. But a crucial setting you must change is the exposure compensation value. You see, in my time testing the Neo, I have found that it tends to overexpose the highlights, especially on a bright sunny day like today. You will find that a lot of the time, the sky will just show as completely white. So to fix this, we can use exposure compensation. Now, if you press the small EV icon on the bottom right of the controller screen, changing this value allows us to tell the drone to expose slightly darker or slightly brighter than it thinks is correct for a given situation. So I recommend that you lower this to -0.3, and this will tell the Neo to expose ever so slightly darker, and this will help preserve those highlights. And here's a quick top tip that will help you get better footage really easily. I have found this drone doesn't have great dynamic range, and so you will get better results if you record with it facing away from the sun, as this means it doesn't have to compete with such a contrasty scene, a super bright sky and quite a dark foreground, as when you capture video facing away from the sun, you will be capturing a landscape that is more evenly lit, and this results in better looking footage. But when recording auto, you will also find that the Neo can have quite large exposure shifts. And this is especially true if you're moving from a dark area to a light area or vice versa. And these large exposure shifts can look quite jarring to your viewer. So before you hit record, I always recommend that you log the exposure. Now, you can do this by pressing and holding on the screen until you see a padlock symbol appear. And what this means is as you fly around, the Neo will no longer automatically adjust the ISO and shutter speed, so your exposure will not change, and this results in much better looking footage. Now, currently we can only log the exposure when flying the Neo with the controller and the smartphone combined. If you're flying the Neo by itself or with the smartphone only, we can't log the exposure. So it'd be nice to see that feature added in a future update. And now for a setting that will make your life even easier, and that is the button customization settings. You see, if you want to use the log exposure feature, and I highly recommend you do, having to press and hold on the screen each time can be a bit of a pain. But we can actually map the lock exposure functionality to the FN function button on the front of the controller, so when we want to use it, we simply have to tap that button. Now to do this, you want to go to the settings menu, and under control, you want to scroll down until you see the button customization options. Now in here, you can choose what happens when you press and double press that FN function button. So I'm simply going to set the press functionality to AE lock, but you can see we have a range of other functions in here that you can select. And now with that set, every time I want to lock the exposure, I only have to tap that FN button. Very handy. Now out of the box, much like all recent DJI drones, I find the footage that comes from the Neo has quite an over-sharpened digital look to it. So to help make the footage look much more natural, I recommend that you change the image adjustment settings, and specifically the sharpness setting. So while we are still in the settings menu, if you tap the camera option and scroll down, you will see an option called Style. And when you press into this, you can see we have two image adjustment settings, sharpness and noise reduction. Now I highly recommend that you lower the sharpness to -1, as this will reduce some of that over sharpened look that the footage has, making it look much more natural and to my eye, much better. Now a setting that will help you get much better shots, especially when flying drone moves manually with the controller's joysticks, is the grid line setting. You see, when you're flying around a subject, maybe you're doing an orbit for example, it can be quite hard to see where the center of the screen is. And this can lead to situations where as you're performing that drone move, the subject drifts off center, or when you're capturing footage, you might think that you have your subject aligned centrally, but when you view it on a larger screen on your computer or laptop, for example, you might realize that you were actually way off. So instead of guessing, I recommend you go to the settings menu, and again under the camera subheading, if you scroll down, you will see we have this grid line option. Now I personally recommend turning on the first option, which is the big X, as now when you go back to the camera view, you will see we have this X superimposed over the camera preview. Now this grid line doesn't get saved into the final footage, it's simply overlaid on the video preview to help you see where the center of the screen is. And now as you do drone moves, it will be much easier to keep your subject centered as you fly around it. Now let's take a look at two crucial settings if you're flying with the Goggles 3, and the first one is the electronic image stabilization setting. You see, the DJI Neo only has single axis mechanical stabilization, so the stabilization is done electronically using something called rock steady, but you want to make sure that you have this set in your goggles settings menu. So within the settings menu of the goggles, you want to scroll down and go to settings and then go to camera. Then if you scroll down, you will see a setting called EIS, which stands for electronic image stabilization, and I recommend you have this set to rock steady, and this will make sure that the footage that comes from the Neo when flying with the Goggles 3 is super smooth. Now you might wonder what the other setting, horizon balancing, is. When you select this option, with horizon balancing turned on, this ensures that the horizon of your footage is always level. So no matter what way the Neo turns, when you look at the footage after the fact, the horizon will always be level. But because you probably want to get a sense of speed and thrill and excitement in your footage when flying with the Neo, I find having the horizon always stay level diminishes this. And also because it has to crop in the footage slightly so that it can manipulate the footage to make sure that horizon is level, it can also result in lower quality footage. So to get super smooth footage that's exciting to watch, I recommend you have this option set to rock steady. Now something that's super exciting about the Neo is the fact that with the FPV Remote Controller 3, you can fly it completely manually. However, out of the box, this option is disabled. And the reason for this is so that beginners won't accidentally switch into manual mode without knowing exactly what it does and crashing the drone. So when you're ready to fly manually, again you want to go to the settings menu within the goggles, but this time go to the control settings menu. Now you want to make sure that you have the FPV Remote Controller 3 turned on, and when you do, you will see this remote controller option appear. And then under button customization, you want to scroll down and select custom mode and change this to manual mode. Now we're not done yet. There's one more setting we need to change to make sure we can do things like flips and rolls. So you want to go to the top of the menu and go to the gain and expo settings, and then scroll down and make sure you turn off M mode attitude limit, as this allows the drone to completely roll over and flip forward. And now with those settings updated, whenever you switch to the M mode on the back of the remote controller, you will be able to fly the Neo completely manually, and it's very exciting. So there you have it, the top 15 settings you need to change if you have just got your brand new Neo. And hopefully these settings help you have more fun using it, get better looking footage, and have safer flights. Now, if you would like to see my full review of this little drone, where I share what I love about it and some areas I'm not so thrilled with, you can watch that by clicking up here or by clicking the link in the description down below.